Welcome to Something to Offer, the show that spotlights people living their dreams and making a difference. And now the host of our show, Anne Marie Offer.
Do you have something special to offer? Sure you do, and so does our guest. And he'll share his special something in just a moment. I'm so thrilled. Today, my guests are really two guests, an institution that is synonymous of New York, and an individual who puts a lot of efforts to keep that dream of that institution alive. The institution is the Appolo, and my guest is an actor who's taken on an additional role as tour coordinator and group sales rep for Apollo Theater Foundation, Billy Mitchell. Billy, thank you so much for being here today.
It's a pleasure to be here, Anne-Marie.
Billy, what was your first theatrical experience as a performer?
Well, my first was in a dinner theater right there on 125th Street. There's a community legend there. His name is Papa Charles, and he has a dinner theater there in Harlem, and we do a lot of fundraising for a lot of the nonprofit groups there. So my first experience was to work as an actor in one of his theater troupes.
Can you tell us about your first visit to the Appolo? When was it? Who did you see, and were you hooked right then?
Well, my first visit, I came there years ago with my parents, but the first big memorable experience was in 1969 when I came on a night in which Michael Jackson and his brothers were the guest artists performing that night, because years ago, if you won amateur night, your prize or your reward was that you became the guest for the next 4 or 5 weeks. And on that particular night in 1969, I saw Michael Jackson and his brothers, and I did not know till this day that this guy was going to be as big as he is right now.
So had they already won one of the amateurs before that, or was that their first amateur?
Well, they had won previous Wednesday, and they were asked to come back as the guest artist performing for that night. And on that particular night, I didn't know who he was, but then when they reintroduced this guy, I saw this little kid with this big hat on his head coming out there with such stage presence. I just thought, this guy's got to be a little midget. You know, nobody has that kind of talent, but he just wowed the audience, and it was just so memorable, really.
I was curious, Billy, from your initial experience at the Appolo, and you're working with them for over the years, has the experience for the audience and the participants changed over the years, or does it stay true to the original essence of what was going on at the Appolo, at least from the time you started going and then working for the Appolo?
Yeah, the basic tradition has remained. The audience has changed somewhat, where now we get a lot of foreigners that come here to witness amateur night, because the tradition is still there. The audience are still the judges. Of the talent. The talent is just tremendous. Each week we have the best talent in the world that come there to audition or perform an amateur night. And the audience, they're just so thrilled to see the legendary Apollo Theater stage and all the artists who performed there. And then things have basically stayed the same.
How exactly does one get on amateur night? Is it, do you pre-audition, do you interview, is it like still $5? Do you pay $5 and then you get to perform?
No, it's no charge to audition. Now, every 6 months we have an audition. That's the process you have to go through. Every 6 months, our coordinating producer of Amateur Night Live, which is done every Wednesday night at 7:30, just for your information. The person who auditions that show, her name is Shirley Matthews, and she auditions people and she chooses a few that she thinks have the talent to appear, and gives them a date in which they are allowed to come and perform on amateur night. So that has become the same pattern as it's been for years.
We're going to take a moment for an offering, and when we return, we're going to find out more about this legendary theater where stars are born and legends are made, to quote Ralph Cooper. Don't go away, don't switch that dial. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Billy, the Apollo is such a symbol of New York and of America, really. I work with people from other countries and they'll say, I want to see the Apollo. And I was like, sure, no problem. So many talents, so many legendary greats have come from the Apollo. But I was hoping that we could take our viewers back to when it began. You know, when you look in historical books, they say the Apollo began in 1913, 1914. And it really wasn't the Apollo. It was another theater. It was the Herrick Seaman New Burlesque Theater.
Well, the theater was built in 1913, and in 1914 it was named Herrick and Seaman's New Burlesque Theater and Opera House. Now that was the name of the place from 1914 till 1934, when at that time Frank Schiffman and his family, they bought the place, and he renamed it the Apollo Theater. Apollo is based on the Greek god of entertainment. So that's why he named it the Apollo Theater.
Right, I was going to ask you, it's interesting, I wanted to ask, I find it fascinating that he chose that name because, you know, I like to always put things together, go, okay, what does Apollo mean? And it literally means the god of sunlight, prophecy, music, and poetry. And when I think about the Apollo, I wondered if that was his intention, Mr. Schiffman, and also if it did its own self-fulfilling prophecy, because in a way, you know, it does bring, when I think of sunlight, it brings joy and warmth, and that's what the whole experience is up there, and the performers getting that opportunity. And prophecy, well, these people we see, it's kind of a prophetic thing that they're probably going to be the ones we see, like you said, the Jacksons, or, you know, whoever, Charlie Bird, or whoever it would have been at the time. So, do you know anything about anything more about why he chose that name? Do you think he had that much vision at the time?
I think he did, because Mr. Schiffman, I did know him. I was a young kid when I first met him and attending the Apollo Theater, because he used to let a lot of us sneak in there, you know, thinking that we thought we were sneaking in, but he knew we were going in anyway.
He was training you.
This guy was incredible. But he had a vision, and he knew the pulse of the music industry. He knew what people liked. He knew what artists that would probably take off. He had a vision, or he could choose talent similar to the way that Berry Gordy and Motown chose talent. I mean, this guy was just, Mr. Schiffman, just incredible. He was a Jewish brother, but he knew black talent and black music so well, and he knew that some of these artists would come here on amateur night and would probably one day be big superstars. And he just had that gift.
And we could list them on and on.
Oh, God, I tell you. I mean, you go back as far as Billie Holiday, Sarah Vaughan, Louis Satchmo Armstrong, Sammy Davis Jr., you know, James Brown, Michael Jackson. I mean, all these people, I mean, he was largely responsible for getting their careers off the ground. But of course, Ralph Cooper was the creator of Amateur Night.
Right, I wanted to speak about Ralph.
Yes. But Mr. Schiffman had this vision, and he knew just what talent would probably succeed.
So you have Amateur Night, you had that then and now, and then you also book other nights in the week. There are talent that comes up and performs that are not amateurs, that are professional, and still now some legends come back. It's really nice that they do. Some of them do come back.
Some of them, yes.
Before we go any further, I want to focus on you a little bit, Billy. Your life kind of runs parallel with what's happening with the Apollo. You know, you are an actor raising a family. How did you go from being that audience member as a young man to working for the Apollo Theater Foundation?
You know, I've always loved the Apollo Theater. My first experience as coming there to work when they were going through the rehabilitation of the theater back in 1981. And my brother was one of the guys who was helping to do the construction there. And I stopped by, and there was a gentleman who was managing the theater there, God bless the dead, Mr. Charlie Worrell. And I walked by, I had my suit and tie on, just coming from my regular job downtown as a credit manager. And I said, Mr. Worrell, I would like a job here. Is there anything I could do? He said, looked me up and down and says, there's nothing you can do here with that suit on. We're doing construction. So I says, well, when you're open, is there a possibility I could do a job here or get a job here? He says, well, we'll have positions open as an usher. And that's how it started out for me. I had a meeting with Mr. Percy Sutton, who was the owner of the theater at the time, and they hired me to be an usher. And from there, I started managing the ushers, and showing them how to speak with people and how to address customers, and then from there I just went on to manage several departments at the Apollo.
You taught them how to work the room, as they say.
Exactly, how to work the room. That's exactly right.
And I've seen you in action, and you really work that big room.
Thank you.
It's such a treat. Your guided tours are so spirited, with you sharing the history of the legends, and also because of your talent as an actor, you bring characters to life and put light on it. It's really wonderful. And we'll probably get to see a little bit while we're talking in clips behind us. How did you format that yourself, the way that you give the tour? And you have the certain photos of different legends, and then you do some kind of imitations or slight imitations. I don't know, different things.
Yes. Well, I did format that type of tour because in my lifetime I've been on several tours at different places, and to be quite honest with you, some of them have been quite boring. And I said, well, if I'm going to get myself involved in these tours and handle these tours, I want the tours to be not only educational, but I want them to be a lot of fun for the people that are touring. I want them to start singing some of the songs. If we see Sam Cooke up on the walls there, because we have a wall full of several of the big, great performers who have performed there, and I'll start talking about Sam Cooke, and then I'll start singing, "Darling, you send me," and then the other people that are touring, they'll join in, and we'll go from one picture to another, and then later on at the end of the tour, we actually put on our own little amateur night.
But he doesn't let anybody boo. I like that. I like that better. I don't like that booing stuff.
No, not
and
for our tours.
Booing is not for the tours.
Now, the Apollo really had a heyday. The 50s, 60s, part of the 70s. But at some point during the 70s, something happened, and a lot of the wind went out. But I wanted to talk more about who's kept the Apollo going and alive. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of hard work. I know people turn on their TV sets and they think it's showtime at the Apollo, but it's not. It takes a lot of work and effort. So can you talk to us about the key people who keep this legend alive?
During the 50s and 60s, it was the heyday because during the 60s, you had the groups like the Motown Review, which would come to the Apollo Theater. On any given show, you could have Stevie Wonder, the Marvelettes, the Temptations, Marvin Gaye.
All my personal favorites.
Yes,
I'm
Gladys
from Detroit, so I love
Oh, of course, you know. And all these people would come there and perform. Times had changed. In the 70s, there was the emergence of disco music, which also would prompted Mr. Schiffman to have to close the theater up. The disco music was being replaced from, we had R&B going and rock and roll, and disco came in, and disco artists rarely performed at concert halls like this. What they did was they recorded their music in the various studios, shipped the tape outs to the clubs, and we would party off it. So it stopped people from coming to the theater. Also in the 70s, the economy
was very bad.
It was bad, so people didn't have the money to go and see a show at the Apollo Theater. So with the music coming in, the economy in the area, and people just not being interested, he was forced to close because of lack of funding. And then those artists that did want to come, they were asking for such large sums of money, he couldn't afford to pay them.
Now we're going to take a moment for an offering, and when we return, we're going to find out how the Apollo didn't close and who helped keep and who continues to keep this legend alive. So come back so you'll hear the details. Hi, we're back. So, Billy, the Apollo, let's take it from where we were. The Apollo closes in the 70s. Did it stay down long? What exactly happened?
In about 1977, then between 1977 and 1982, a couple of groups came in there and tried to do certain things with the Apollo and bring it back, but none of it significant. Then along comes Mr. Percy Ellis Sutton.
An amazing man.
Oh, God bless him.
He does so many things for so many
people. He's
people
just an incredible man. I have so much respect for him. I love the man dearly. He had a vision to because he always loved the Apollo Theater. You know, he would come there years ago and watch shows, but he had a vision to make the Apollo Theater a multi-media type of facilities. He wanted the recordings done there. He wanted films to be done there, and also concerts. And he had this vision. So what he did was he brought the Apollo back to the way we know it right now. He fixed the place up. He had a recording studio built there, a television control center, a sound stage where commercials and music videos are done. And Mr. Sutton was largely responsible for getting the Apollo back to the way we see it right now. I don't think anyone else had the vision or could have pulled it off like he did.
The Apollo, Billy, is really, and I mentioned it before, it's really an international icon, and it crosses any barriers of race, personality, financial struggles, or whatever. How does your staff maintain this, and how do you keep the legend alive? I mean, it requires a lot of support. Do any of the stars that were discovered at the Apollo, do many of them come back and help financially support it? And, you know, there's a tremendous amount of downtime that happens where I'm sure you're like thinking, where are we going to get this money? How are we going to find it?
You know, Percy, Sutton, and Inner City Broadcasting are not the owners of the Apollo Theater now. We're now the Apollo Theater Foundation. We are a non-for-profit foundation. We do have 501...
And a historical landmark,
That's right. It's a city, state, and national landmark. And we do have 501c nonprofit status. So we have a mission to educate people about the Apollo, to honor the past people who performed there, to restore the facilities, and to promote up-and-coming artists. That is our goal. That is our mission. Right now, our executive director, Miss Grace Blake, who's doing a
very nice lady.
She's doing a great job in helping us. We have a lot of programs that are coming up. We deal a lot with the community. We have the tours that are done every single day. We show free movies to the children once a month. We've been doing that for
different
almost...
film companies send over films.
That's right. We've reached out to the various film studios and asked them could they donate a film once a month so that we can show it to our children. Because if you're living in the community of Harlem or anywhere close by, and you're a single parent or whatever, and you have 5 or 6 children, it's just almost impossible for you to afford to take a kid to a movie. So what we've done was contacted the various film companies, and they've offered us a film so that we can show it to the children free of charge once a month. And we've been doing that now close to 3 years, and we're very, very proud of it. You know.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, it's a great show.
What we see on television and we think of as the Apollo and Amateur Night is really very different than the Amateur Night. I mean, it's little snippets of the Amateur Night and then professional talent. So it's a whole different thing.
It's totally different. As a matter of fact, those are 2 separate shows, 2 separate producers. What you may see on TV is a show called Showtime at the Apollo. That is taped for TV. They come into the theater several times a year and tape those shows, yes, and edit them down and show them. However, the original Amateur Night, which is done at the world-famous Apollo Theater every single Wednesday night at 7:30, that is the original show. That is the most fun, to be honest with you. It's a great, great show. Every Wednesday night, ticket prices are affordable, and you meet people from all over the world. We have guest artists that come in there, guests that drop by, you know, and just last Wednesday, Dionne Warwick came by.
Did she just visit or she sing?
No, she didn't sing, but she came by.
She brought her psychic friend?
Oh, no. Well, I asked her where they were, but she didn't bring them.
I'll call them up right now.
But it was great to see her. She looks marvelous. She came by.
She's such a lady.
She is, and she, in front of everyone, she promised to do a fundraiser for us in the near future.
Oh, great.
And I'm sure she will stick to her word on that, and we're looking forward to that happening. A young lady, Allison Williams, who's a great, great singer. She sang a medley of Dionne Warwick songs, and it was just like a tribute to Dionne that night. It was a great night.
It's nice.
Can you share, Billy, some of the origins of some of the things we're so familiar with about the Apollo? For example, the tree stump that everybody rubs. It's not really from the Apollo, it's from another theater in Harlem that I think people went to and stood in front of to find out about whether they got hired for jobs or not.
Well, that the tree stump is called the Tree of Hope. It was originally a tree that was planted in front of a very famous theater in Harlem called the Lafayette Theater. Now, incidentally, that tree stump was planted originally as a baby tree by the great dancer Bill Bojangles Robinson. And it grew and grew to be this huge chestnut tree. And people in the entertainment industry, like actors and singers and dancers and whatnot, would always go to the Lafayette Theater to audition for shows. But before they went inside, a lot of them would stand outside, you know, leaning against the tree, getting their thoughts together, you know, rehearsing their lines or whatever. And what they thought was that this tree had some sort of a magic or power, because 8 times out of 10, after they came from the audition, they got the part. And they swore up and down it had something to do with this tree. So one day the tree was scheduled to be torn down, but before it was torn down, a lot of those same people and others would come by and take pieces of the bark off the tree, as it were a rabbit's foot or a good luck charm. Others would take a leaf off, and then others would take a twig off. But what Ralph Cooper and Mr. Schiffman did, they went one step further. They decided to cut this entire stub of that tree off, and they brought it to the Apollo Theater so that on amateur night, when the amateurs were called to come out and perform, they all had to rub the tree for good luck, supposedly like it had brought those people years ago, and that has become a tradition ever since. But I tell you something now, I don't care if you rub that tree, kiss it, or pray over it. If that crowd doesn't like you, you're out of here.
You don't got it. You don't got it.
Oh, I'm telling you, they're very honest.
Oh, they're brutal.
Brutally honest.
And Sandman, our favorite Sandman. That's been a couple people, right?
That's true. Originally, the guy that would come out and you know, jump around and lights flash off was a guy whose name was Norman Miller, who they nicknamed Puerto Rico. And he was there for a while, and he was the guy who actually started with the hook. He would hook talent they were booing and bring them off stage. And then Howard Sandman Sims picked up the job after that. Sandman's been with the Apollo now for about 46 years. The gentleman is 78 years old.
Amazing.
God bless him. And he still comes and does the Sandman character on the TV show Showtime at the Apollo. However, on Wednesday nights, we have a guy whose real name is C.P. Lacey, who comes out, and his character is the executioner, similar to what Sandman does.
Oh, okay, so he takes them away.
Billy, in brief, could you say what you think it is that a young person or anybody needs to go after it, as that's what you kind of impart? All these people at the Apollo went after it. So what is that you feel a person needs?
Well, Ralph Cooper, he was like a mentor to me when I first came to the Apollo Theater, and I've always heard about Ralph Cooper as being an actor and things like that, and I've always wanted to be an actor. But when I came to the Apollo Theater, Ralph Cooper would sit down. I would sit down with him, and he would give me the history of the Apollo and about acting and giving 115%, regardless of how you're feeling that day. You could have had a fight with somebody, an argument. You could be hungry or whatever. However, but when you go out on that stage, you must give the audience 115% because they're paying their money to come see you. So he taught me that because he's from the old school, and he also taught me the history of the Apollo. He, along with a gentleman by the name of Francis Dahl Thomas, who used to work at the Apollo and was the curator. And of course, my dear friend, Mr. Charles McRae, also known as Papa Charles. We'd run this dinner theater in Harlem, and he is an old Broadway star or actor who've done at least 6 or 7 Broadway shows, but these guys were never big stars, but he taught me how to act. I owe all my success to him. You know, you learn from a lot of these schools that they have out here now, and they'll take your money, but you really come out there not knowing anything, you know, about how to act. So I've learned from the old masters, as I call them, the Papa Charles, the Ralph Coopers, and I just want to thank them, and they've taught me to give this and pass this on to the people, to educate the young ones about show business, because it's a 2-word, show and business. Now, a lot of people want to be in front on the stage.
They do the show. They can't do the business.
They can't do the business, and a lot of times they're ripped off, and they don't know how to deal with people. So they taught me how to deal with people and make people feel good. And I think I've accomplished that here at the Apollo Theater. At least I hope so.
I hope so. I hope you continue to do that.
Thank you.
And we have about maybe 40 seconds or so. And what would you want young people to know about, in brief, going after it? Because what your whole thing is about all these people who have gone after it.
Yes. Well, I want the young people, you can do anything you want to do. It's important to stay focused, and let's say if you want to be a recording artist, if you want to be an actor, if you want to be a doctor or a lawyer or a musician or whatever, stay focused. It's important to stay focused. Don't let little things on the side distract you. For instance, stay away from those drugs, kids. And I'm not trying to lecture you. That's very important. Get a very proper education. Treat others with respect. Walk with your head held high and be very respectful. Those are things that'll take you far. You know, we think that it's all just about standing out there being the big rappers and being stars. You have to have some sort of self-respect and treat others with a lot of respect. So we try to encourage that into the kids when we have them come to the Apollo Theater, as well as the adult, because there's a lot of adults that need a little bit more education about how to carry themselves and how to treat others as well. Once that is accomplished, all those barriers between races and things like that can be erased, because it has to start individually. All of us cannot stop racism, because to be honest with you, the Apollo Theater wasn't a place where just blacks performed. I mean, whites performed there all of the time. And, you know, a lot of people just have a lot of misinformation about it,
right.
Particularly a lot of our foreigners. So when I come there and I express that to them, this is a place for everybody. They're surprised. Then we take them on the hallways and they see the Dave Brubecks, they see the Buddy Riches, you know, they see all these wonderful people who started here at the Apollo Theater and are very, very much a part of the Apollo Theater legacy.
Thank you, Billy. And to all you viewers out there, let's stay focused. Focus on your dream. Be determined. Look inside yourself and go after what you want. It's out there for you. See you next week.
We would like to thank Putumayo, located in Soho, for Miss Offer's wardrobe, and Echo Videotape on 9th Avenue for helping to make this show possible. But we would especially like to thank you for watching. I'm Jeannie Devlin. We look forward to having you with us next week, and in the meantime, remember, the world needs what you have to offer.